This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I'm Karen Beach. This is the Journey Step by Step podcast. And you know why I'm rejoicing, y'all? I'm from Ohio, but I moved down south and I picked up y'all like it was nothing. So I say it all the time like y'all, I like sweet tea. I always thought that I was a Southern girl once removed, and then now it makes sense. Anyway, what we're doing today is the first of our Believers Bubble episodes. What's a Believers Bubble? It's when a couple believers get together and we talk about an issue that most Christians will face or that they deal with or grapple with on a regular basis. And today we're talking taking your faith to work. Now, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't just be a Christian for 2 hours on Sunday. You should be a good Christian, or at least a Christian, a striving Christian, let's put it that way, 7 days a week. How many days? 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's how many. Numbers confuse me. So I did the math beforehand, and that's 168 hours. So you are a Christian 168 hours a week. 40 of those hours, you probably are at work. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. So what does it look like when you take your faith to work? What do you take it to work? Are you obvious about it? Are you not obvious about it? What does that look like? So we're going to talk about that. And with me today, I have two authors. I have Susan Neal. She is a registered nurse, and she's a Christian author. And one of her most recent books, I'm going to be buying soon. It's 7 Steps to Get Off Sugar and Carbohydrates. So welcome to the journey, Susan.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Okay, and then we also have another Christian author and speaker, Anita Wilson. And Anita works under a pseudonym or, an alias. Let's put it that way. So what is your alias? You just told me about it, and it's so interesting.
Yes. I take the letters of my name, Anita Wilson, and I rearrange them, and my alias is Alias in Town. And it's just a rearrangement of the letters of my name. And the reason I chose it is because I write and speak about mental health. And in every town, there are alias people living with mental health and chronic illness and addiction issues.
That is really powerful. And I know you all are living my dream, whereas you're like authors and you don't have like a 9-to-5. But you did at some point. So let's talk about that 9-to-5 experience. So I'm going to go from the superficial, and then I'm going to go get deep. I'm going to get really deep.
Okay.
But on the superficial, if you were working in your office or, in my experience, in your cube, if you're in your cube or your office and someone walks in, would they know that you were a Christian?
They probably wouldn't know without talking to me first. I didn't have anything displayed on my walls or anything like that. But once he started talking to me, you would pick up on it pretty quick. One of the things that interested me was that people would automatically, without me saying anything, not curse around me. And I never told anybody that they just automatically picked up that I don't curse, so they just automatically didn't curse around me. And it's not anything I said or asked them to do. It's just that they started to pick up on things about me and who I was as a person.
And that's Susan, right?
This is Anita.
Okay, I'm going to get your voices in like 5 seconds. So, I have
a little bit of a rasp today, so.
So that's Anita. Anita's the raspy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I don't really, I keep little funny things around my desk, but most of them revolve around dogs. But I don't I don't keep my stuff on my desk, and I made a conscious decision not to do that, because when I first started working, I did train. I'm a trainer by trade, and I was working on a contract at a big government agency. And there was one woman who, John 3:16 is displayed on her desk. She had like a screensaver that was Christian, Christian, Christian. But every time I talked to her, she was negative. She was gossipy. And I was like, okay, there was a saying I read a couple days ago, and it says, as a Christian, sometimes you're the only Bible non-believers read. And good. So powerful. I thought about all that stuff on her desk and then who she was as a person. And I'm like, if I'm not a Christian and I'm looking at that, it's not sending a very good message.
That's very understandable.
Plus I've been known, the Lord is working with me on the whole cussing like a sailor thing. So if I have a bunch of Christian stuff on my desk and I go off on a tear, then that's not very Christian, so I don't want to wear my faith and end up being hypocritical.
Right. That's because that is probably the number one thing that non-Christians will say is Christians are such hypocrites. And that's just simply because we're Christians, we are still human and we still make mistakes and we still sin. It's just that we know who to take our mistakes and our sins to. So, it is something that people look at you. They really do observe your life. And they do. Really look for. Yeah. They look for things.
Susan, as an RN, how did you show your faith at work at all?
I may have worn like a necklace with a cross. And, people could figure it out that way, but it was very non-obvious.
Now, did you ever talk to patients about your faith, or did patients ever talk to you?
No.
Okay.
Not that I remember.
So, you weren't, because I would imagine, if you were in a terminal wing or certain wings, there might be more of an opportunity to share your faith.
Right. It was over 20 years ago, and I was only a nurse for 2 years before I went back and got 2 master's degrees. So.
Okay.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Pretty heady stuff there. Now, here's another question about faith at work, and it's not so obvious because, having a Jesus bumper sticker or a screensaver that screams your faith is one thing. But have you been in situations, I'm sure you have, where your decision making is influenced by your faith? You might not talk about it, but the decisions you make are affected by your faith.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Even if I'm going to be on a guest podcast, I listen to the podcast. What kind of language do they use? Do they have Christian values? Or if they're not, they're respectable. Absolutely. Decisions in all aspects of life. Do I want to hang out with this person? Do they have similar moral values? You have to be friends. What book to write? Pray about it. Get spiritual direction. Absolutely. So many decisions in your life are influenced by your faith as a Christian.
Susan?
Yes, ma'am.
You just spoke.
Yes, I did.
Didn't I say it was going to take me 5 seconds? Anyway.
And you got it.
What, when you look at your faith and you look at work, where do you see a synergy?
That is a good question.
I am, a Christian, and I want to try and follow Jesus. And I want to do, he is my model. And the Bible, is our book for wisdom. And like when I went to write my books, I wasn't afraid to make my book, infuse my Christianity into there. For example, like with my 7 Steps book, it's like, it's hard to get off sugar. It's hard to get off carbs. And so I believe in eliciting God's power and strength and using his word and the sword of the Spirit to gain even more power to be able to make a difficult lifestyle change that so many people have difficulty making. So I infuse who I am through my faith and my following of Christ into my work. And I'm very fortunate now that I am an author and I can, do this versus being in a work environment as I was previously and where you're not supposed to really cross the line.
Yeah, the line is not crossing that line is a very interesting thing to think about. But yeah, there are ethical situations that arise in business decisions, and sometimes they do go against your faith. And one specific example I can think of was a time when one of my managers wanted me to lie about something because a deadline wasn't being met, and I couldn't do it. I had to be truthful, and it didn't set well with my manager. He wasn't very happy with me about that because he expected me to lie for him, but I couldn't do it. So,
and what was the consequence of that?
He gave me a bad review at my next review, that I wasn't a team player. So I ended up transferring out of that department. But I had to do what was right. I couldn't lie for him.
Wow, it cost you your job.
Well, it didn't cost. Yeah, it cost me the job in that position in that company. Yes, I stayed within the company. I just changed departments. So yes, it did. It cost me like that position.
Right, for you to attain and stay with the moral values that you believe in.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you knew the values didn't reflect what you believed in? And now
I'm trying to think.
I'll give you an example. When I was out of college in the 90s, I had a job. My degree is in journalism. And I think those of us in journalism, communications, and marketing, we all get slammed with sales jobs because everyone thinks that, oh, this is marketing. No, it's not. What we had to do in this particular job was there was a pool of people on the phones and they would make appointments for us. And we would have to go out. And a long time ago, there was a club called Columbia House, and you could buy records through Columbia House. And we had a similar program where you could buy CDs through the program we had. And we had to memorize a long script and, learn how to overcome objections and all that. But the guy that trained us wasn't the main manager. The main manager was on vacation when we started. And it was a very high pressure job. You didn't get a lot of time off. And basically what they wanted you to do is say what you had to say to make the sale, whether it was 100% true or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a problem with that. So the day that the manager came back in, he talked to us for a minute, tried to ascertain like how well we were trained. And apparently we weren't trained that well, because he called the other manager into the office maybe 50 feet away, closed the door, and proceeded to cuss at him like he was nothing.
Wow.
And everybody sat out there and listened to it. What the heck is wrong with you? And dropping F-bombs and everything else. And everybody sat there, and I got up and I said, this isn't the job for me. And I put the stuff down and I went out, because number one, I had a problem with the say anything to get a sale. Number two, I had a problem with the fact that we had to work 6 days a week, like 10 hours a day. And if you needed time off, you probably weren't going to get it. So there was this lack of understanding. And then on top of all of that, this is how the manager talks to his assistant. I was like, no, it wasn't aligned with who I am as a Christian or as a woman.
Good for you.
When you talk about the line, there being a line to cross at work, I found that, especially when it comes to sharing my faith with my fellow coworkers, that is a difficult line to walk, because you don't want to come across as a preachy person. So the only thing I did was I tried my best to love the people that I worked with. And, if somebody had a need, just something that came up in their life and something that came up in a conversation, I would just ask them if I could pray for them. And I would pray for them right then and there, right in the cubicle, and tried to live out my Christianity in a natural way by just loving the people that I was working with and valuing them.
Now, were you ever told that you had crossed the line?
I wasn't, no. I was never told that. Because I didn't preach. I wasn't a preachy, or a judgmental kind of person. It was just a matter of love and support.
Now, I've been in situations where it's not that I'm preachy, but non-Christians assume once they know you're a Christian that you should be preachy. You know what I mean by that? It's like,
I do.
Well, you're one of those Christians. It's like, okay, but I didn't say anything about your lifestyle choices. I didn't say anything to you about anything. So why is it okay for you to, stereotype me or put me in a box? Right.
It does happen. The Christian stereotype is not a healthy one. It's really sad. It really is sad. The Christian should be reflective of the love of Christ, as he commanded that people would know us by our love. And instead, Christianity has become to a point where people have a hard time looking at us and seeing love and seeing the love of Christ, and instead seeing what they call hypocrites,
right,
and judgmental people. And it's a sad situation that we're in.
I understand that, because I was watching, I don't watch it a lot, but I was watching the 700 Club, and a woman had a question at the end, and she was saying that she saw two same-sex people kissing and canoodling, and she walked over to them and said, "You're wrong."
Oh boy.
And even Pat Robertson, who I don't agree with 90% of the time, was like, you were out of line.
Yeah.
You don't just go over to people like that. Now, if they had asked you, if they had talked to you, then that would be different. But going over a line, and I've had people go over that line with me. Well, you're one of those Christians. And I'm like, but what have I done to you? What have I done to you to make your perception seem valid? And they can never answer me.
Yeah.
I always believe in you have to have a relationship with someone before you're going to, intervene in whatever way. I just really don't believe in, trying to evangelize or, talk to someone, unless the opportunity came up. But you want a relationship. You want to have a relationship with others before you ever approach them about the love of God.
That's so true, because even Jesus would, he built relationships with people. Like he hung out with sinners. He hung out with the people that needed him, and he built relationships. And he is an example of exactly how we should be. And I so agree with you. That building a relationship with someone is first and foremost the most important thing.
And see, once you have a relationship with someone, then they can see who you really are too.
Right.
And that's where the change comes. If every morning, before I lost my job last month, every morning when I went into work, I would get there super, super early. So I'd be to work by 6:30 in the morning. And I would see the gentleman who was finishing up the night shift. And every morning I'm like, hey, good morning. How are you? And that's how you know me. Not as this negative, oh, don't talk to me, it's morning person. But you see that I'm upbeat. I'm talking to you. I'm interacting with you. And if you want to know, that to me tells people more about my faith than a lot of other things, than a lot of lecturing that I could.
Yes, absolutely. We should value other people. Other people have value, and we should value them and love them and elevate them to a place of importance, because each person is created in the image of God, and each individual person has value and worth, and we should treat people like they have value and worth.
And as Christians, we really should do that. Yes,
it's so important.
Because we live in a world where I'm supposed to treat you better because of your title or because you make so much money. But I talk to the, cleaning ladies same way as I would talk to a VP, because in God's eyes, we're all the same.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
That's true.
Absolutely.
But, I think living your faith is the best thing you can do.
Absolutely. Be Jesus with skin on. Be Jesus.
And loving him, loving others through God's eyes. It's like if I get around someone who just rubs me the wrong way, I pray and I ask for God to help me to love this person the way he wants me to love them. Accessing his power to be his hands and feet.
Yes. Yes, that's so good.
Yeah, I mean,
boy, if we could love like God loved, wouldn't that be amazing? That's the desire of my heart, is to love people like God loves people.
And I surely can't do it on my own, because I'm totally human. So I get into this situation. I ask for God's help. Please help me.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm just able to get the scales off and see the person from a different view, and, hopefully meet a need of theirs somehow, whether it's a real friendly hello, like you said, you do, Karen. Yeah.
Yeah. And being impatient. Another thing that for me is being impatient. And if I'm working on something with a deadline, or working, and I really need to have my nose to the grindstone, so to speak, and I get interrupted by somebody, I feel like my reaction is not usually a good reaction, but being interrupted by a person, that should have more value than my work. And so I really work on that. I really try to value people and understand that I need to put my attention to a person, because if they're interrupting me, it could be something very important. And what I'm doing may be able to be set aside for just a few minutes of interaction with somebody who is worthy of my attention.
True. You need to it's hard to always put people first, but that's what we need to do in work. And and it's hard at work because you have actual work, but in addition to your work, you have to value people, because it's those relationships with people at work that will make the difference for you.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, when you're at work and you have to deal with people, and you're dealing with a situation or people that rub you the wrong way, I think, Anita, you mentioned it. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with, and I'll be more specific, at every job, in every school, there are cliques of people. And there are groups of people that get along, they single people out, and they don't like that person. How do you deal with those cliques, that office politics kind of thing, as a Christian?
Yeah, office politics are difficult to navigate, that's for sure. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question, to be honest. Other than go ahead.
I ignored them. I just ignored office politics. I didn't get into it. I was not a drama person, and I would just ignore them. I'd do my work, put my nose to the grindstone, and get it done.
Yeah.
I didn't care about the cliques. I didn't care about, fitting in. I cared about doing the best job that I was asked to do.
Right.
When we do work, we should do it as though we're doing it for the Lord. And so, I was for the employer who was employing me, and I just really tried to stay out of it. Just didn't.
Yeah. I think probably the most difficult thing with having different cliques at work would be getting drawn into gossip.
Yes.
And that is something that I would try to avoid at all costs, and just say, I can't talk about that right now. I don't want to talk about that. Because people will just gossip about other people, and that's just the way we are as human beings. And so that's the only thing I can think of when it comes to dealing with cliques and office politics, is the gossip that is involved in that, and how damaging that can be, how hurtful that can be.
Very much so.
We should not participate.
Right. Don't participate in it.
And I think if you go around kind of avoiding it, people who try to draw you in will eventually ignore you.
Yes,
that's right.
They'll eventually ignore you. When they say something to me, I just say, well, I don't have anything to say about that.
Yep. And then eventually they just quit coming to you.
Well, you know me. I don't have anything to say about that. And then I'm just nice to everybody. So after a while, people know adults to me in a lot of ways are like big kids. And if
we are.
if you have kids, if you're like babysitting for kids, or, you know, the longest year of my life I spent as a substitute teacher, people will test you. They'll test you. They'll see what they can get away with. And if they know they can get away with so much, that's exactly what they're going to do. But if you don't let them get away with it, if you call them on their crap, then they get it. Okay, I can't get away with this with her.
Right. And you know, when I was telling my story about how I didn't get involved in the office politics, and it reminded me of me raising my kids. I raised 3 daughters. Well, listen, I am not into the drama. I am not into the whining and complaining, and they know it. And so they, you know, it was a no drama household. We just don't do that. You know, Mom doesn't fall for that. She didn't want to hear it. So same with all that office politics and the gossip. Gosh, if I encountered the gossip, I would just walk away. I mean, that inappropriate.
Now, and you're right. People just tend to realize, okay, I can't gossip with her. She doesn't go anywhere with it.
Yeah, you know, if they get to that person and the person's response is, girl, she didn't, right, then they're going to go to that person more than the person that says, I don't know about that. What about this work assignment? They don't want you.
Exactly. That was me. I was so business.
Now, here's a question. About 10 years ago, I had a job where I was a subject. We got a new manager in, and she bullied me. She bullied me unmercilessly. And because everybody else wanted to be in her good favor, they bullied me as well.
Oh, that's terrible. That's sad.
One Christian that was there, her response was just not to say anything. So what do you do when you see someone who is in need of help?
Well, in that particular situation, I would try to help that person go to HR, and put in the appropriate complaints or something. But that is a tricky road to travel right there.
I mean, it's tricky because you need to keep your job too.
Exactly.
Right. And if you do go to HR, then you're going to have your evidence. You need the documentation. I don't know if it'd be a recording, a witness. You want objectivity to bring it to human resources. Right. So, I mean, that reminds me of like me with my kids and how I would tell them, okay, if this is happening to anybody, this bullying, you stand up for them. You be their friend. You sit with them at lunch.
And I think that the difference is you can do that more if the person doing the bullying is an equal.
Right.
It becomes a problem when the person is a superior.
Yes. I feel so bad for you. How did you deal with it?
Yeah, actually, it's like I suffer from depression. I'm a suicide survivor. And when she found out that I tried to kill myself the year before, she got worse. And I ended up taking 6 weeks of administrative leave, short-term disability. But, I saw my therapist more, I prayed more, I got myself together. So that when I went back and she called me in her office on that first day and said, we're still on track to fire you. My response to her was, she's like, do you have any questions? I said, yes, I do. And she was like, well, what question do you have? I said, do I do anything right? Mm-hmm. And she saw from that meeting that I stopped being a victim. Because I was making myself worse by letting her have the upper hand. So I went back thinking, no, I'm going to, stand up for myself. Of course, 5 weeks later, I was out of a job, but that's,
Well, it sounds like a place that the Lord wouldn't want you to be.
At that point,
sometimes
I didn't want to be there. At that point, I'm like, okay, wherever I'm going next, I'm going to trust in the Lord, because that's not the place for me. The Lord does not want me feeling like I felt every day at that place.
Exactly.
Right. And we need to find our worth in the Lord. Our value is from God, not what your boss thinks about you or other people think about you, but it's from the Lord. So your value is from the Lord. So if we're being bullied or put down, just know you are worthy.
Yeah. You know that
it's not from other people's approval.
No, it's not. But I was glad not to be there. Even still, I was glad not to be. I mean, because at one point, I had what I thought was a friend at work, and I went on vacation, and I sent her a picture of me in a bathing suit saying, what do you think of this? She took it around to everyone at work, and they laughed at me.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, and then I come back to work, and I'm like, how do I have to work with these people? And my boss is like, well, you need to get over it. And I'm like, okay. But even still, leaving was a setback. It took me back a little bit. I had to find a new job, but ultimately it was a good situation, because the Lord took me out of a bad situation. And I knew that whatever happened next was going to be better than that.
And sometimes we have to make those tough decisions, and sometimes we have to change a career or change a job. And it's hard to do, but it seems to me like it was the right thing for you to do, is to get out of there, to just not put up with that.
And my next position, I was with all godly people.
Oh,
well, then there you go.
Praise God. That's great.
There you go.
So it
reminds me of.
Go on.
It reminds me of an addict. It reminds me of an addict, and when an addict comes home from being within recovery, and they come right back to their old environment, how easy it is for them to be drawn back into the addiction. And sometimes addicts need to leave, and have to move away and move to a different city altogether, just because they can escape temptation. And I admire that you realized that like workplace environment that you were in was toxic, and you needed to get out of it. You need to get away from it. And sometimes that's the only thing that we can do.
As a child of God, you have to realize that, He's our Father. And if you have an earthly father, my earthly father doesn't want that for me. He wants the best for me. So my heavenly Father is going to want the best for me too. And when he removes me from one situation, I have to trust that he knows what he's doing, because he can see a lot further ahead than I can. I can see to the end of my nose. He can see for miles and miles and miles. So who am I going to trust? Am I going to put my trust in my own efforts, which I've done in the past? Or am I going to put my trust in his? When I do it myself, it's riddled with worry, feeling overwhelmed, all of these feelings that I have that, we talk about resting in the Lord and putting our trust in him. There's a certain peace that comes with that you don't have when you're trying to do everything on your own.
That's true.
Amen.
All right. Well, I think we're done talking about faith at work. What did we learn today, people? What did we learn? We learned that you take your faith to work. You might not be showing it outwardly, as far as decorating your cube with Bible verses, but it does impact the decisions you make at work. And that is the most important thing. Impacting the decisions that we have and the way we treat other people at work. And, you know, as we were talking about earlier, it's about relationship. It's about getting to know people and helping people when we can, and letting Christ go through us and letting his being, or being more like his being on the job. That's what it's about. So with that, dear listener, I'm going to end this episode, and I'm going to end it by letting you know to be strong and courageous, and do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.